Welcome to the first ever episode of the Why You Overeat podcast with me, Sam Gibson. So I'm here today to tell you, I'm going to kind of take you through a little bit of a story about how I got to the point of being a published author, of how I work with people on their eating habits, how I've actually coached 2,000 people inside of my coaching programs, and what I ultimately specialize in, which is helping people beat decade-long cycles of binge restrict eating, help them understand their food noise and break the habit of overeating and using food for comfort. Let's kind of use this as an origin episode. Who's the guy behind the book? Who's the guy behind who you might watch on social media? You might have seen a few YouTube podcasts with me and before, or maybe you've been to one of the events I've done. I want to tell you about how I'm in this position right now, recording this video, this podcast for you. If I think about who I'm inspired by personally, loads of different authors, loads of different gurus, loads of different coaches who I've worked with, I really start to like, know and trust them when I understand who they are as a person. So I want to use this episode today to just give you a bit of a backstory on my own struggle with eating disorders, disordered eating. So how did it start off for me? Now, I don't know if you're listening to this and you have a similar backstory where you've suddenly become aware in maybe your early teenage years or adolescence years, or maybe at 10 or 11 years old, where you suddenly become aware of my body is something that other people judge. And up until that point, it would never even enter your head. And it's almost like that childhood innocence about your body and your appearance is taken away overnight. This obviously starts to develop as you get into a teenager. You probably remember, like, all of a sudden you started getting these thoughts and feelings that you never had before, and it's a very confusing time. Coincide that time when your sex hormones are kicking in, you're going from a child, becoming an adolescent, becoming a teenager, becoming a young adult. All of a sudden, you have this sense of people see me, people notice me, people judge me. I've got to look like this, I've got to act like that, I've got to impress people, I've got to be validated. And your entire childhood innocence is gone the moment that you start caring about what people think of you in terms of how you look, your body, your physical appearance, your weight, your fashion sense. But that's the nature of school, that's the nature of growing up. You start to become very, very self-conscious. So when you are growing up, your brain's actually not fully developed until you're about 25. So up until the age of about 25, you don't actually have what's called the executive center, or the frontal cortex, the front part of the brain that is responsible for dealing with emotions, that's responsible for rationale, logic, foresight. It's not fully developed until you're about 25. Most people have unfortunately went through some painful emotional experiences, or quite possibly even quite traumatic events before the age of 25. So when I work with people inside of my coaching program on their eating habits, they normally have some sort of story where at one point in their life they felt very self-conscious of their body. They felt very criticized. They suddenly become very aware of it. That set off a little bit of a chain reaction and planted a seed in their mind of how I am treated, validated, loved and accepted is all dependent on my physical weight, my physical appearance. Then throw in just life, experiences, traumas, programming, certain things that you went through up until the age of 25, that's what creates your emotional eater. It's life experiences that have negatively impacted you in a negative way. They were very emotional or possibly traumatic. And the seed that was already planted of my body represents my sense of worthiness. My body represents how accepted I am by other people. My body represents how good I am. And it's normally the two things together that create what I call emotional eating. Nobody is born an emotional eater or an overeater. They are made. It's a connection of that nature and nurture together. So I talk about this a lot in my book, and if you've got the book, you'll see the kind of people I've worked with. And many people will notice that correlation between when their eating habits, where they start overeating more than normally, coincide with traumatic life experiences or stressful periods of life or difficult times that they went through. So I was always hyper aware of my body and what it looked like. And as that got into teenage years and you wanted to impress girls, I wanted to be the best footballer, you wanted to get attention as a teenager, that manifested into what I would say becoming quite obsessed with my body. Now I remember being 14 or 15 years old when I started lifting weights, and at that point I started seeing bodybuilders online, started watching YouTube videos, started seeing all of the gym culture, and I convinced myself in my head, unless you have a six-pack, unless you look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, no one's going to care about you. You're not going to be an athlete. You're not going to be good enough. And I guess at that time I was struggling with my confidence a little bit. I'm naturally an introvert, which is strange now considering I literally talk for a living. I go on stages and deliver keynotes, I deliver group programs, but I'm more naturally leaning towards introversion. I know how to turn it on because I'm competent in what I do and what I teach, but I'm more naturally an introvert, and I was definitely an introvert in childhood and teenage years. However, I realized at the time, I started lifting weights, I started dieting really hard, I started getting in shape, and that would get me validation or attention, just words of encouragement by other people. And I think, right, that's what you do then. That's what you must do to get attention and validation. So again, that seed that was maybe planted in childhood about your performance and therefore the way you get treated by others and accepted by others. It's about your appearance. It's about how you look. And eating habits is something you've got to control. That's the thing that you've got to control. So that unknowingly set off a chain reaction that then developed into a little bit of body image issues in teenage years. And then when I got to, leaving school, 16, 17, 18, 19, I got involved in bodybuilding and I wanted to be a personal trainer. And that laid the foundations for my disordered eating habits. I remember a time I went on my first lads holiday. It was 2015. We had a group chat about it and we're talking about it all year, and every night out we had, we'd all be excited about this holiday that we're all going on. And it was like the first lads holiday. You've seen all the movies, you've seen Kevin and Perry, you've seen the In-Betweeners. And I was excited. That's what you do as an 18, 19-year-old. You save up your money all year and you go on a mad lads holiday, you get drunk, you get up to other questionable things. And that's what you do at that age. So that was the thing that I was dieting for. So I remember I isolated myself from my friends for like 4 months and I got in ridiculous shape. I went on this crazy diet where I do like 2 hours of cardio a day. I would cut my carbohydrates out for like 6 weeks. I would eat egg whites. I would eat cottage cheese. I would eat vegetables. I would have no carbs. I wouldn't even have fruit. I was so strict and I got in the best shape of my life for this holiday. I'd been kind of holding on to willpower for so long where I felt so restricted, so depressed. I actually felt quite anxious because I was putting my mood, my mental health on this pedestal of I've got to get a six-pack for this holiday. I've got to get in amazing shape. I've got to look like this, otherwise I'm not going to be accepted. I'm not going to be worthy. Your entire personality is around how you look. Now, this is all subconscious, of course. I'm not really having these thoughts, but that's what's going on in the background. So I'd put my entire mental health on going on this holiday in the best shape possible. However, the night before I went on the holiday, I actually had one of the worst binges of my life where I compulsively ate loads of sweets. I think I went through a full packet of actual bread and I just kept making slices of toast after slice of toast. And it was almost like the anxiety, the anticipation of this holiday coming up that I was actually starting to feel so nervous about that I'd lose my results, that I would gain weight on this holiday, that, oh my God, I've done all this work to get in shape. What happens if I drink for a week or I eat takeaways? What happens if I lose all my results? And I created so much anxiety that I ended up binge eating to cope with the anxiety. And I remember waking up the morning of that holiday that I put in my head for so long as this is going to be the best holiday ever. I felt really depressed. I felt bloated. I felt horrible. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to lose my progress. That's how obsessive I was at the time. The moment I went to the airport, it was all bets were off. And I compulsively ate on that holiday for like 5 or 6 days. Towards the end of the holiday, I'd actually gained about 30 pounds in 1 week because I couldn't control my binge eating. And I didn't realize at the time, but very, very restrictive dieting really created a bit of a negative relationship with food. And I went on the holiday and I didn't enjoy it at all. I did not enjoy it at all. I felt anxious, I felt depressed, I felt overwhelmed, I felt emotionally dysregulated, like I couldn't be present because I was just so worried about gaining weight. And when I was so worried about gaining weight, I felt anxious. And when I was anxious, I would binge eat in secret. So I would come home early on the nights out. I would be having a few drinks in the hotel and I would just disappear. And I'd go to my room, get pizzas and eat pizzas on my own because I felt like I was going to have a panic attack. And I ruined that holiday. I didn't even have a good time. I didn't even enjoy it. I haven't got any fun stories to tell you because it wasn't really a good holiday. I didn't enjoy it at all. And that set off a bit of chain reaction. That was the first time that I think I ever experienced really bad depression. And I remember towards the end of the holiday, I just felt so low that I was just like, I don't even know if I want to live anymore. But I put it in my head that I was going to have the best holiday ever, and I was just a 19-year-old kid. And I didn't really think about life after that holiday. And when I gained all that weight, because I gained so much water retention that I was all bloated, because I literally gained like 30 pounds in a week because I compulsively binge ate the entire week, overate by thousands of calories every day, and I felt quite ill. Well, you can actually Google this. There's such a thing called refeeding syndrome. Bit of a history fact for you. They first discovered refeeding syndrome after they liberated a lot of people from the concentration camps in Europe in the Second World War. And the Allied forces, broke the German front lines and they managed to liberate the people and the war ended. Well, they had all these people who they freed and they were all emaciated. And the first thing that they did was give them loads of food and loads of water. Well, thousands of people who actually survived the concentration camps died in the weeks after being liberated because a lot of people's electrolyte levels, immune system and the lack of nutrition, the malnutrition, had put their body in a state of dysregulation. Huge amounts of highly palatable food all at once, too many calories at once, it did something to the electrolytes in the body, and it brought on heart attacks, it brought on organ failure, it brought on kidney failure and things like that. And the doctors didn't have a clue what was going on. You can Google this, it's a real thing. And the scientists that observed this going on, they started to say, we need to wean people back on food. They discovered that refeeding syndrome was a real thing. So if you're listening to this right now and you'd ever went on a prolonged period of very, very low calories, then all of a sudden you binged for maybe a couple of days, you would have got the starting points of refeeding syndrome, which is loads of gastrointestinal stress, heart palpitations, you might even start to feel lightheaded, dizzy, your blood sugar's all over the place, you might feel like you swell up and you get edema in your legs and your ankles and things like that. That's the start of refeeding syndrome. I actually went to the doctors because I actually collapsed when I got home. I was in the bathroom and I went to get changed, went in the shower, and it was like the hot water hit me at once. I literally collapsed. I don't know how I didn't smash through the glass shower pane on the side, but I remember I woke up about 5 minutes later, butt naked on the bathroom floor. I grazed all my arm, and I was like, what the hell's happened? It was the weirdest moment of my life. I literally collapsed. And I came out that night and went, oh, I feel really ill. I was like, right, go to the doctors tomorrow. I've done a blood test and whatnot. And he was like, your liver values, your kidney values are off the charts. He was like, are you a heavy drinker? I was like, well, I didn't drink for like 6 months, and then I went on holiday and I took loads of alcohol and I just ate loads of junk food. He's like, yeah, blood lipid levels, your kidney and liver values are off the charts. Like, what's been going on? And I told him what happened, and he was like, yeah, it sounds like you've just pushed it too hard. He went, what you need to do is eat a low carbohydrate diet for a couple of days. You need to let this water weight come off. I was so bloated. And he was like, I'd recommend flushing yourself out and really focusing on nutrition for the next couple of days. And for about 5 weeks, I felt like I had the flu. I was ill, and it was because I'd pushed my body to the limit through extreme restriction followed by extreme binge eating. On this crazy diet where I managed to stick with it for so long until I couldn't control it anymore. I ended up compulsively binge eating on this holiday, gained 30 pounds in a week. I was very ill. I had the flu. You know what I did after 4 or 5 weeks? Started training again, and I started putting myself on an extreme diet again, and I'd done it again a few months later. And I kept doing this cycle until 2018. So for 3 years, 2 or 3 times a year, I'd go on a diet for about 6 to 8 weeks. I'd lose 20 or 30 pounds in an extreme, non-healthy way. Then I would binge for 3-4 weeks after, feeling anxious, feeling depressed, feeling so low, not knowing how to control that food noise. And I'd bounce between restrict, binge. And I did that 3 or 4 years in a row, and I didn't tell anyone about it. And in that time, I was still posting on social media, telling people I'm a personal trainer, I'll help you with your diet. I had university degrees in sports psychology, sports nutrition. I was putting on this image of I'm the bodybuilder, and I would go through these crazy transformations up and down with my weight. I'd fluctuate so much that people didn't know what version of me they were going to get. And it was a difficult time in my life because I felt so ashamed. I felt so ashamed because I'd get in amazing shape and then I would just blow it all out the window. And then I would feel so guilty and so depressed, and I would go on another extreme diet. Do the same thing again. And this went on for years, and I kept it hidden. Towards the end of 2018, it was around about this time that I started suffering with panic attacks in my life. These panic attacks were very hard. They were very difficult to deal with. I actually checked myself into hospital twice, literally thinking I was dying. And they were just like, you're not dying. We've just done a scan on you. You're fine. Do you ever struggle with anxiety? When the doctor explained it, I was like, I've experienced with anxiety my whole life. If I was a child and I had a nightmare and I woke up and I felt scared, I would often sneak downstairs and put biscuits in my mouth. And all of a sudden, these things started unraveling in my mind when I'm like, I've always used food. I've always been an emotional eater. Even though I'm a health professional, even though I've got degrees in exercise psychology and sports nutrition, even though I'm a bodybuilder, even though I'm a qualified personal trainer and I teach people how to lose weight, even though I know all of the nutritional stuff, I've always been an emotional eater. And that made me feel so ashamed. But when I started actually understanding what it was, the moment I felt anxious or overwhelmed or nervous and I got the physical symptoms of the heart palpitation, the racing thoughts, that really nervous, restless energy, I would take myself off, I would hide in secret, and I would numb with food on autopilot. And I didn't even realize that I was doing that. And when these panic attacks started happening in my life, and I'll get into that in other episodes about the psychology behind how I understood why I was experiencing depression and anxiety. I also talk about it in my book. There's a 7-step framework that explains why you would be suffering with anxiety and depression in your life. These 7 environmental voids are the system and the framework that I use to help people uncover the reasons why they are experiencing depression or anxiety. And food is often the symptom of those depression and anxieties. So I didn't even realize at the time, but I was experiencing severe anxiety and depression from a few things that I wasn't dealing with in my life. But I was just trying to mask it through getting in amazing shape. So I convinced myself I'll be happy if I maintain this six-pack. I'll be happy if I win a bodybuilding show. I'll be happy if I do a fitness photo shoot. I get 100 likes on an Instagram photo. I'll be happy if I get accepted for how I look. That's all I cared about. And I didn't even understand underneath that there was some mental health issues going on. So I was using my body as this shield. You'll get happiness, you'll get worthiness, you'll get love if you look a certain way. But it was fueling this disordered relationship with food, displaying multiple disordered eating behaviours, which again I get into in the book. And I'll break them down in another episode, all the types of disordered eating behaviours to look out for and how you can see which ones you are struggling with. There's a passage in this book where I talked about one of the worst binges I ever had. I felt so guilty, so ashamed. I waited until everyone was in bed. I was about 23. I went into the bathroom, locked the door. I went into the cupboards. I looked for like shampoo and conditioner and other bathroom products. And I made this little concoction with water. And I stuck my fingers down my throat while pouring this concoction of bathroom products into my mouth to try and make us gag. And it didn't really work. Nothing came up except I was just sicking the water up and retching. And I just literally remember at that point just feeling so low. And I remember lying on the bathroom floor, just like tears in my eyes watering, just like, what am I doing? Just feeling so out of control in that moment. It was a low point. It was a very low point in my life. That feels like a lifetime ago. I'm a whole different person now. But that's where this disordered relationship with food ended up taking me. So in 2018, I realised I've got to do something about this, man. I've got to do something about this. And it was after that binge, I left the house. I didn't want to be here anymore. I lay on that bathroom floor and thought, I can't live like this. If this is what living is like, I'm out. I left the house at like 4:30 in the morning. I don't know what I was going to do. Now that thought only lasted maybe 10 or 15 minutes. I went on that walk at 4:30, 4:45 in the morning. And I remember just walking around. I just remember having tears in my eyes, just streaming down my face. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to go home. I didn't know where I would go. I had no money. I wasn't doing well at the time financially. I was working in the gym for 2-3 hours a week. I didn't really have any PT clients, 1 or 2. I was really struggling. I didn't have any money to go anywhere. I didn't know what I was going to do. The 3rd of March 2018, that happened. That panic attack happened. And on that walk, something kind of came over me and it was like, what's going on? I've got a problem. I've been masking this for years, but I'm binge eating. I feel so self-conscious about my body. I feel so depressed. I feel out of control. I feel so ashamed and nobody knows this. It's a secret I've been keeping. It's ruining my relationship with my partner. I'm isolating myself from my parents. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And that backstory is what set me off on a chain reaction of figuring out how to overcome anxiety and depression. What are the real reasons people struggle with their relationship with food? What leads to someone having a negative relationship with their body, with their mental health? What turns someone to being a binge eater? What causes eating disorders? How does that look in real life? That set me off on a path of discovering how to heal my own relationship with food. It corrected a lot of wrongs in my life. I understood mental health and emotional dysregulation, and I realised if I could solve the problems in my life that were leading to anxiety and depression, if I could work on my self-esteem and my perception of me, if I could shatter the beliefs that my worthiness is about my body and how it looks, and if I could do that personal development work on myself and overcome this disordered eating, then I can help other people do it as well. So I'm going to talk about this in future episodes, about how I actually help people. How to actually understand what are the true root causes of emotional eating, what causes binge eating, why people struggle with binge restrict cycles, why other eating disorders manifest. What does that look like for real people who are possibly listening to this podcast right now and just want to get to the bottom of what it is they're really struggling with? Obviously, I talk about this in the book, so I will link the book below if you wanted to check it out. It's on Amazon, but you can also buy it from my website, Why You Overeating, How to Stop for Good. So this book contains my personal backstory, my origin story about what led to those things. And then when I actually developed a business helping people solve the same problems that I had and help them heal their relationship with food, it's 8 years of experience, of stories, of trials, of tribulation, of what works and what doesn't work. And I can't wait to share that with you in future episodes. Please check out the link below to my book. Make sure you like, comment and subscribe. Check out the links to my social media. And if something really stuck out to you today, if a part of my story resonated with you, if you heard me say something where you're like, oh my God, that sounds exactly like me, or I struggle with this as well, please tell me what it is that you got from this. Please comment below and let me know what it is you'd like to get in future episodes. So I am going to see you in the next one. You have an amazing night, an amazing morning, an amazing afternoon, wherever and whoever you are right now. I'll see you next time.